Jalil Okafor was recently traded to the Brooklyn Nets, where he was promptly bought out, and then he signed a non-guaranteed contract with the Atlanta Hawks. And as a result, his place in the league continues to look shaky as it has the past couple of seasons. And because his name was in the news, naturally a lot of people were talking about him, and one of the biggest talking points was how he just simply played in the wrong era. And I definitely agree. And I had a thought that was, well, that's an interesting video topic, but not in just some like, hey, here's a player who would be better in this era, end of video. Really, I'd rather look at just the very idea of saying that a player played in the wrong era and giving it a more nuanced look, and really kind of looking at the problems with suggesting something like that. So let's talk about players who played in the wrong era. Before I continue on with this video, about half of the people that watch these videos are not subscribed, so if you fall into the 50%, then please subscribe. Also drop a like on this video, it only takes 1 second and makes a massive difference. Also, there is a new episode of my Mavericks My NBA series out now on my 2K channel. The link to that will be in the description for those who are interested, as well as the pinned comment card above, all that. And for those who have not seen it yet, episode 1 is on this channel and the rest of the series is on that 2K channel, so go watch episode 1 and continue the series on that channel and subscribe there. It's a realistic type thing. It's not the same like trading for Kevin Durant in episode 3 type of deal. Realistic, slow paced, and I think you'd be interested in it even if you don't like 2K. So go check those things out in the proper places. Anyways, obviously first we should talk about Jalil Okafor because he's what inspired this video. Coming into the NBA, Jalil was a post-scoring center whose all-around game left a lot to be desired. His rebounding was fine, but nothing special. He wasn't a playmaker. He kind of had a mid-range shot a little bit, but that was as far as his shooting ability went, and his defense was very, very bad. However, Okafor would go number 3 in the draft of the Sixers, and because they had no one else to shoot the ball and Jalil was a great post scorer, he averaged 17 in his rookie year, but then two things happened. The game went in a different direction pretty much as soon as that season ended. It was already going there, but it became even more evident then, and Joel Embiid came back from 2 years of injury. And as I mentioned, the guy has barely been an NBA player ever since his rookie year. And the reason is just the worst possible timing. People say that he should have played in a different era, and when they do it, I feel like they mean like the 80s or the 90s or something. But no, you didn't even have to go back that far. If Okafor was drafted in like 2007, he would have been good. Like, I think you could make somewhat of a comparison between Jalil and like Al Jefferson, who was a 2010 big man from 2007 to 2014, whose career ironically started to die for the same reasons Okafor's did. But hell, the guy had a long run. But I mention Al because I feel like that's a far more reasonable idea of what Jalil would be in a different era, because a lot of people say this about Okafor as if he played in the 80s, 90s, or 2000s. He would be like a superstar or something. And the reasoning is just incredibly stupid. It's, well, he score in the post. They used to do that more in the past. Therefore, boom, perennial all-star. It's like, well, first of all, if anything, if post scoring is so much more prevalent, his ability to do it stands out significantly less so than it does today. But also, other than like the 50s, Okafor's inability to do anything besides for post-up is still problematic in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. It's still a problem that he has no all-around game. The star big men of the 80s through 2000s weren't some one-dimensional guys who could just hit a hook shot and then go on to play garbage defense and rebound and pass at a whatever level. Not to mention that as skilled of a post scorer as Jalil is, size and power are also a thing. And while Okafor is a big dude, there's just something about him that's never been physically imposing to me. So really, I think that Okafor would have been in like an Al Jefferson type of tier, where he's a guy that can score, but because it is that time period, the way in which he scores is deemed good, so he would have opportunity and be a good player. But it's not like Okafor is some 90s MVP that is cursed to play in the modern era, because like Shaq wouldn't have been bad today. He would have been very good still. Hakeem would have been very good still. It's not a matter of just that. Being a good player is being a good player, and that can transcend eras, both for going to more difficult and easier eras. I also think something similar about Ennis Cantor. Now, interestingly, Cantor is a great rebounder, so that's another good thing going for him that you can throw in there. But Ennis, I think, would have been a good but not great player in the 80s through 2000s, but not like Shaq or something like some people seem to suggest. I don't know if you've heard this before, maybe from like your dad giving you a rant about how much better the 90s was, but older eras of basketball really care about defense even more so than they do today. So you think a player, just because he can score in the post, is not going to be scrutinized for being a terrible defensive player? You're not going to be a center and be a garbage defender who can just score 20 points per game in the post and then suddenly you're a superstar. That's not happening in those eras. But now let's talk about my other point, and this point more so pertains to players who played in eras in the past and people say would be better today. The two main examples I have to talk about here are Lamar Odom and Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf. Probably going to say that wrong a couple of times, so I'm trying my best. Lamar Odom was a power forward that could handle the ball and pass while having some incredible agility and speed for that position. He was a true point forward whose peak was from 2000 to 2010, and that was really uncommon for the time. Though some of the weirder aspects for the time of his game never were fully embraced, I think under the right circumstances, he could have been the primary initiator while also being like a 20-point-ish scorer, and he didn't really get that opportunity because the weird elements of his game were not seen as something that you could build upon as they are today. Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf, on the other hand, was a point guard in the 90s, who in his peak from 92 to 96 averaged 18 and 5, but what stood out was how jump shot and in particular three-point shot heavy he was, and even more in particular pull-up three-point shot heavy he was. Mahmoud would shoot pull-up threes out of the pick and roll, which was very, very uncommon in the 90s, off of the dribble, and any capacity pretty much never happened. He would also take long twos in a similar fashion, which if it's the modern game, those are going to be cut out because now long twos are illegal and you get sent to jail if you take them, as it should be. I don't care what you old NBA fans think. Long twos are just stupid. Mid-range shot has a place, but not from that far. Just get behind the three-point line at that point. And because of this unique element, Mahmoud stood out, but given the modern context, he especially stands out as a player who plays a whole lot like a modern guard. Like many people have called him Steph Curry before Steph Curry. Now, I'd say that's a severe overestimate of his abilities because if you put him in today's league, I don't think he'd be Steph, but still, it's from a modern context where Mahmoud really starts to get his credit as a player, as well as a civil rights activist, because in some respects, Mahmoud was the earlier version of Kaepernick, and that got... My dog barking in the middle of this is probably racist on her part, right? Like, that's just fucked up. I start talking about civil rights and now she won't shut the fuck up. It's like 2 more weeks and I won't live here anymore. Just 2 more weeks. Please. And that got him blackballed out of the NBA. But that's a whole nother topic that I will talk about in a deep dive that at this point has taken so long, I'm just hoping it comes out within this century. But here's the thing, unlike with Okafor and Cantor, these players were actually good in their era. As good as they would have been in the modern era? No, but still good. And at least in the case of Lamar Odom, what made Odom stand out, what made him so popular, was that he was so different. Nowadays, a point forward is a dime a dozen. A 6'10" guy who can pass and dribble is commonplace. And in the case of Mahmoud, he became much more appreciated over time, but again, if he played today, his legacy wouldn't be half of what it is now. Because he wouldn't stand out from the crowd. Wow, a 6'1" guard who takes pull-up threes out of the pick and roll. That sounds like almost every other guard in the NBA. Suddenly, he's not a pioneer. He's just a guy. While it would have made these players better to play in a modern context, it would have taken away from them standing out and being unique. It would have made them a whole lot less compelling. Being ahead of your time makes you stand out. Being just one of like a dozen... Being ahead of your time makes you stand out. Being a good player amongst the 24 players that have a similar archetype to you does not. This is actually like semi-similar to something that I've said about Jon Stockton before, and that is that Jon had the capacity to be more of a scorer and less of a passer, and I think that would have A, made him a better and more impactful player, and by extension B, made his team better and more successful. But if Jon had done that, he would have been much less praised and stood out significantly less because he wouldn't have the all-time assist title. What is the good basketball thing is not always the good legacy and standing out as unique thing. And I guarantee you that if Odom or Mahmoud played in the modern NBA and we fast forward to the end of their careers in like the 2030s or something, I'm sure that they would not be nearly as loved and appreciated as they currently are right now. So there's some of my thoughts on the idea of players being born in the wrong era or playing in the wrong era. I don't even think it's wrong to say like, hey, this player would be better in this time, but I think there's more interesting angles to look at that discussion. And also I think it's just thrown around as a blanket statement without considering like, no, Jalil Okafor is not an MVP in the 90s. Like, it's not that simple, but that's basketball discourse online for you. Anyways, thank you for dealing with my dog's bullshit. I have to deal with it all the time, so this is nothing for you. Shout out to Rudy for editing this video, but at the end of this video, please be sure to like and subscribe for more NBA content like this, and cue the outro music. Just a quick tip for you, Rudy, by the way. If you're looking up photos of Lamar Odom to put in this video, type in Lamar Odom NBA or Lamar Odom Lakers, because otherwise you're just going to get a bunch of Kardashian photos.